Ridley Scott's 1982 cyberpunk film Blade Runner, despite its mysteries and complexities, in the end tells quite a simple story. A lot of the best movies do. Die Hard, John Wick, 12 Angry Men, Saving Private Ryan, Gladiator, I could go on. In fact, this simple story, complex characters thing is echoed by the video game writer Neil Druckmann, who said just that of his massively successful story game, now a great TV show too, The Last of Us. It's important because if you stuff your film with too complex a plot, you spend so long trying to explain it to the viewer through dull exposition dumps or talking head scenes that its majesty gets a little lost and you end up with something like the 3 Matrix sequels. Blade Runner avoids this pitfall, sticking to a simple story with so much space to breathe and room for interpretation that it's kept its fans occupied for decades. It tells the story of Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, a man living in neo-noir 2019 Los Angeles. Deckard is a retired Blade Runner, a cop charged with tracking down and taking out escaped androids known as replicants. When 4 new models go on the run, Deckard's old boss, Bryant, played by M. Emmett Walsh, strong-arms Deckard into coming out of retirement and going after them. And, well, that's about it. There really isn't much more to the plot than that. Deckard meets a few characters, a love interest, the story plays out, we watch him go after them, there are 1 or 2 twists and turns, but it pretty much flows as you'd expect it to. So why, you might be asking, is this film as beloved as it is? The answer to that is simple. The characters, their interactions, the themes, the world, set design, costume design, the music, the newness of it all back in the early 1980s and how much of an audio-visual spectacle it must have been are all nothing short of incredible. Let's start with the visuals, because in that way alone Blade Runner is undoubtedly one of the most influential films ever made. You see its DNA everywhere, even today in movies, games, books and more. Its setting is chrome-filled, neon-lit, dirty, grimy, rainy, and loosely inspired by paintings such as Edward Hopper's The Nighthawks. The level of detail is impressive. You could spend minutes looking at every new frame and learn things about the story world, how it works. Apparently, tiny inscriptions and slogans were carved into backdrops that would never be seen by the viewer, but would sell the reality of the story to the actors. There are so many iconic visuals, like the geisha popping tablets on the skyscraper, the swooping hovercars, the towers belching fire in the opening sequence. The lighting is so good and varied that it makes every scene look fresh. There are hints of romantic paintings in some of the locations, like the toy maker's home. There are so many shapes, angles, lines. You could freeze the movie at almost any point and steal the image for the cover of a sci-fi book. It's not just the world either. The costume work is fantastic, straddling the line between futuristic and evocative of the noir films of the 1940s and 50s. The tech, too, has that wonderful early 80s feel, similar to the original Star Wars. It must have wowed back in the day, then looked old, and now has swung back into fashion. The effects work on the film holds up so well for saying it's over 40 years old. Most of it was done with miniatures similar to films like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and they have that charm that modern CGI just doesn't. Yes, you can see the construction, but you can still admire the artistry. None of this design is static either. Ridley Scott uses it to tell Blade Runner's story. Rain pours in for most of the movie, adding to the city's claustrophobia. An egg boils energetically in a pan as a character becomes angry. Steam vents hiss. The moves of a chess match echo characters as they close in on each other. It's layered, textured, and benefits from repeated viewings. We see this so well with the story too, as mentioned earlier. That simple setup, Deckard chasing the replicants, combined with the rich characters, each with their own wants and desires, some clear, some hidden, mean that what comes out the other side is a thematically dense story. The replicants are capable of incredible, frightening violence, but we don't hate them because we understand their desire to keep on living. The film asks questions about what it means to be human without ever doing so directly. We wonder throughout, is Deckard a replicant too? There are hints. Ridley Scott has said he believes he is, but he's also said he's happy to accept it either way. That's what a simple story setup gives you, the space to ask questions of an audience. And we as audiences love coming away from movies with questions. I'd be lying if I said Harrison Ford was the best actor in the world, and he's a bit ham here too. There's an Indiana Jones feel to the way he takes a few punches. Some of his facial expressions are frankly comical. But still, he's well cast in the role of Deckard. That weariness Ford brings to his acting complements his character in the world. Apparently, actors such as Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman, Sean Connery, Clint Eastwood and Martin Sheen were considered for the role, but it's hard to imagine it without Ford. Sean Young as Rachel does a great job as the damsel in distress, seeming bewildered at times by the situation she finds herself in. There's a sadness to her character that Young nails. I also love Edward James Olmos in Blade Runner, and he probably plays my favourite character in the film. He's effortlessly cool, and there aren't many better final lines for a character than this one.
It's too bad she won't live! But then again, who does?
But it is undoubtedly Rutger Hauer's movie, playing the leader of the 4 replicants, Roy Batty. He is one frightening dude in this film with an icy smile and a touch of poetry always at his lips. He's discordant, moves in ways you don't expect. He invades personal space, has strange inflections in his voice, makes odd noises. He's utterly unhinged at the end and far scarier than the monsters of most horror movies. And of course his speech on the rooftop is legendary.
Seeing things you people wouldn't believe.
I've not even mentioned the soundtrack, which has inspired basically every other cyberpunk film or TV show since. It rolls you through the story like waves in the ocean, its synths swelling and rippling. Nor have I mentioned the great pacing or the way the side stories complement the main one, nor anything else brilliant about this wonderful film. Even now, 40 years later, we've still not had anything in the sci-fi genre so creative that's had such a lasting effect. But all that would have been much more difficult to achieve without that simple story to hang it all off, to give it room to breathe. It's a shame that when Blade Runner came out, it suffered at the box office due to releasing around the same time as Steven Spielberg's E.T. History has vindicated it though, and if you haven't seen it and you appreciate intelligent films whose design, sound, story, character all feed into their central theme, look no further. Anyway, nothing more to say. This is Movie Maverick signing out.